Why, what a healed empath really becomes Jung insight. Welcome to our channel. Most people think a healed empath becomes softer, but the truth is often the opposite. A healed empath is no longer easy to manipulate, no longer desperate to be understood, no longer willing to sacrifice themselves just to keep others comfortable. And that's exactly why some people become uncomfortable around them. According to Jung, healing is not about becoming who others expect you to be. It's about becoming who you truly are. So what does a healed empath really become? Why does their transformation surprise so many people? And what happens when empathy is finally guided by wisdom instead of wounds? Let's find out. You've been told that psychological healing transforms you into something gentle, something open, something that radiates unconditional acceptance toward everyone who crosses your path. This is a comfortable lie. Jung spent decades documenting what actually happens when an empath integrates their shadow, and the reality is far more severe than the mythology suggests. A fully integrated music empath doesn't become more accessible. They become operationally dangerous to anyone who mistakes awareness for weakness. Not through aggression, through immunity. And that immunity dismantles entire systems of social control that depend on your unconscious participation. Let me show you what Jung actually observed in the clinical transformation from fragmented sensitivity, music, to integrated psychological sovereignty. Before integration, the empath exists in what Jung identified as a state of permanent psychic porosity. Your nervous system operates without filters. You register emotional frequencies that others cannot detect. The anxiety in a room before anyone speaks, the hostility beneath polite conversation, the depression someone carries but never names. This isn't mysticism. This is differentiated perception developed through survival necessity. You learn to read micro-expressions, vocal inflections, and behavioral inconsistencies, because your early environment required it. Perhaps you had a parent whose mood determined whether the day would be safe or chaotic. Perhaps you navigated family systems where spoken words contradicted energetic reality. You developed perceptual acuity the way soldiers develop threat detection through repeated exposure to environments where missing signals had consequences. But here's what that survival adaptation cost you. While your perception sharpened, your boundaries dissolved. You began to experience what Jung called unconscious participation, the inability to distinguish between your emotional content and the emotional content of those around you. You walked into a room and absorbed the collective unconscious material of everyone present. Their rage, their grief, their unprocessed trauma. All of it flooded your system, as if it were your own. You didn't choose this. Your psyche was structured to be receptive, and in the absence of proper individuation, receptivity became indiscriminate consumption. You consumed other people's shadow material because you had no framework for understanding that their darkness was not yours to carry. The unhealed empath constructs their entire identity around this absorption. You believed your purpose was to metabolize other people's music, pain. You became the family therapist at 12, the friend who always understood at 18, the partner who could hold space for anything at 25, and with each role you buried yourself deeper under layers of borrowed suffering. You had no boundaries because boundaries felt like rejection. You had no limits because limits felt like abandonment. You said yes when your body screamed no. You stayed when every instinct told you to leave. You smiled through your own disintegration because you believed that your worth was measured by your capacity to endure what others could not. Jung saw this pattern repeatedly. Empaths who arrived in his practice weren't presenting with traditional pathology. They were drowning in psychological material that didn't originate from their own unconscious. They were living repositories for the collective shadow. Everyone's denied aggression, everyone's repressed sexuality, everyone's unacknowledged shame. Consider what this does to your sense of self. When you spend years absorbing external emotional content, you lose contact with your internal reality. You can read everyone except yourself. You know what others feel but cannot name your own emotional state. You become a sophisticated psychological instrument, pointed outward with no capacity for internal calibration. This is the pre-integration state. Maximum perception, zero protection, complete self-abandonment, disguised as compassion. Jung understood that most people don't choose individuation. They're forced into it through crisis. For the empath, this crisis typically arrives as betrayal, not ordinary disappointment, betrayal that shatters your fundamental operating system. Usually it's the person you protected most, the one you absorbed pain for, the one you believed would never exploit your openness. And then you, music, discover the truth. They've been lying for years. They've been using your empathy as a resource to be extracted. They never saw you as a person, only as a function they could exploit. This moment is critical, not because it breaks you, because it forces a choice that can no longer be delayed. You can continue absorbing, Continue explaining away what you know to be true. Continue overriding your perceptual accuracy to maintain the relationship, or you can trust what you've always known but refuse to acknowledge. Jung called this the encounter with the shadow, but for the empath, it's more specific. It's the moment you confront your own denied aggression, your suppressed rage, your capacity for severance. All the qualities you've labeled as cruel or selfish or wrong, these are the aspects waiting in your shadow, and integration requires that you claim them. This is not a gentle process. You don't integrate your shadow through affirmations or therapy exercises. You integrate it through acknowledging that you've been complicit in your own dissolution. That every time you override your instincts to preserve someone else's comfort, you commit an act of self-violence. The breaking point is when you stop committing that violence. When you look at the person who betrayed you and feel nothing. No desire to fix them. No need to understand them. No impulse to absorb their guilt or shame or justification. Just clarity. Cold, precise, unshakable clarity. What happens after the breaking point is not what the self-help industry describes as healing. You don't return to a state of openness. You don't become more trusting. You don't soften. You sharpen. Integration means taking every quality you suppressed and bringing it into conscious operation. Your intelligence, your capacity for ruthless assessment, your willingness to let others fail, your ability to walk away without explanation, your skill at identifying manipulation before it fully forms. These aren't dark qualities. They're operational necessities you were taught to view as character defects, and the moment you stop viewing them as defects, everything changes. Jung documented 3 distinct stages in this transformation. Each one builds on the previous. Each one requires that you abandon another comfortable illusion about who you're supposed to be. Stage 1, the cessation of absorption. The first stage is simple. You stop being a receptacle for other people's emotional waste. This sounds obvious, but the mechanism is specific. You develop what Jung called conscious differentiation, the ability to observe emotional content without internalizing it. Someone projects rage at you. Previously, you absorbed it, questioned whether you caused it, tried to fix whatever you believed you'd broken. Now you observe it. You recognize it as their emotional content. You see the projection mechanism operating in real time, and you don't take it in. This creates what looks like mirroring but functions as deflection. Their emotional content bounces back to them. They're forced to hold what they're trying to give away, and most people cannot tolerate this. They escalate. They accuse you of being cold, distant, not the person you used to be. They're correct. You're not the person you used to be. That person was unconscious. This stage destroys guilt manipulation immediately. When someone tries to make you responsible for their emotional state, and you simply observe the attempt without accepting the responsibility, the entire manipulation collapses. They're holding guilt with nowhere to put it, and you're watching them struggle with it, unmoved. This isn't cruelty. It's the natural consequence of consciousness meeting unconsciousness. When you stop participating in someone's projection, they must face what they're projecting. The second stage introduces something that disturbs people who believe empaths should be universally available. You become selective, aggressively selective. You apply differentiated perception to determine who deserves access to your internal world. This is not the same as building walls. Walls are defensive. Selectivity is strategic. You're still capable of profound presence, still capable of holding space for genuine pain, still capable of deep relational connection, but now these capacities are reserved for people who demonstrate reciprocal consciousness, people doing their own psychological work, people who respect boundaries without testing them, people who can sit with their own discomfort without making it your responsibility. For everyone else, you become inaccessible, not hostile, not reactive, simply unavailable. The empath who used to be an open door becomes a threshold with conditions, and those conditions are non-negotiable. You don't explain them, you don't defend them, you don't soften them to make others comfortable, you simply operate from them. This is where the distinction between nice and kind becomes operationally important. Nice is conflict avoidance. Kind is clarity. Even when clarity creates discomfort, the integrated empath stops being nice. They become kind in ways that most people experience as harsh. Kind enough to let someone face consequences. Kind enough to refuse enabling. Kind enough to say no without apology or explanation. Kind enough to end relationships that exist only through your self-abandonment. This selectivity isn't based on judgment. It's based on pattern recognition. You've observed how certain personality structures operate. You know the trajectory. You can predict outcomes because you've watched the same patterns unfold across dozens of relationships. You don't need months to determine if someone is operating from integrity. You know within the first 3 interactions. not through intuition in the mystical sense, through data, through the massive unconscious database you've been building since childhood. The third stage is the one that would genuinely unsettle you if you understood its implications. Because by this music point, you've become what Jung called psychologically differentiated to a degree that most people never reach. You're not just empathic, you're predictive. Think about what you've actually been doing all these years. Every time you absorbed someone's emotional state, you were logging data. Every time you read a room, you were cataloging patterns. Every time you sensed someone's intent before they acted on it, you were building a predictive model of human behavior. The unhealed empath collected all this data, but felt guilty about using it. You second-guessed your assessments. You told yourself you were being judgmental when your instincts identified danger. You overrode your internal warning systems because doing so seemed more compassionate. But the integrated empath trusts that database completely. When every part of your system signals deception, you don't need external validation. You don't need proof. You already know, and you act accordingly. This is what makes the healed empath operationally dangerous. You see the game before it starts. Someone sits across from you, and within seconds, you know. You know they're lying about where they were. You know they're about to make a request designed to obligate you. You know they're setting up manipulation several moves ahead. You know because you've seen this exact sequence before. The micro-expressions don't lie. The vocal patterns don't lie. The behavioral rhythms don't lie. This is differentiated perception at full operational capacity. You're processing psychological and emotional information at a level most humans never develop. You have a framework built through years of survival necessity that now functions as a sophisticated detection system. And here's the critical element that separates the integrated empath from the manipulator. You could use this knowledge destructively. You understand manipulation mechanics better than most narcissists. You know exactly which music vulnerabilities to exploit, which fears to activate, which wounds to target. You have the complete blueprint, but you choose not to deploy it. Jung spent considerable time analyzing why some individuals integrate their power benevolently, while others weaponize it. He concluded that the difference is conscious, ethical choice. The integrated empath makes a daily decision to use their capabilities for protection, not domination. You see the shortcuts. You recognize that your understanding of human psychology gives you unfair advantages in nearly every interaction, but you refuse to take those advantages. Not because you lack the capacity, because you've developed something more sophisticated than tactical skill. You've developed integrity. This is what Jung meant by individuation. You've integrated both light and shadow. You have the capacity for profound compassion and ruthless precision. You can be gentle or severe, depending on what the situation requires. You're no longer limited to one mode of being. When you complete this integration, something happens that extends beyond your individual psychology. You create a ripple effect that forces everyone in proximity to evolve or reveal themselves. Family systems built on dysfunction cannot survive your transformation, not because you're attacking them, because you've stopped being the structural support that held the dysfunction in place. When you remove the person who always absorbed tension, who always smoothed conflict, who always sacrificed themselves to maintain false peace, the entire system must reorganize. And that reorganization exposes what was always true but never acknowledged. Your alcoholic father can no longer drink without facing consequences because you're no longer cleaning up the aftermath. Your codependent mother can no longer avoid her own therapy by using you as her emotional processor. Your narcissistic ex can no longer control you through guilt because you've stopped feeling responsible for their emotional regulation. The empath who enabled all of this is gone, and in their place, music, stands someone who values their own peace more than they value avoiding conflict. Some relationships deepen. The people who respect your transformation, who feel inspired rather than threatened, who start doing their own work. These connections become more authentic than they ever were before, but others disintegrate, and they disintegrate loudly. The people who benefited from your unconsciousness will rage. They'll recruit allies. They'll construct narratives where you're the problem. Because if you're the problem, they don't have to change. This is where your real power shows. You don't defend yourself. You don't explain. You don't try to convince anyone of your worth. You observe. You watch people reveal their true nature through their reactions, and you make decisions based on what you observe. Not with anger, not with bitterness, with clarity. This is conscious participation. You engage with reality as it exists, not as you wish it existed. You see people clearly, you accept them as they are, and you choose relationships based on that clear seeing. No more potential, no more hoping people will change. No more sacrificing yourself for connections that drain rather than nourish. What you become, after full integration, is what Jung called the individuated self. Someone who has descended into their own darkness, integrated what they found there, and emerged with capabilities that most people never develop. You're no longer afraid of profound loss because you've already lost the version of yourself that needed to be everyone's savior. You can let go of anyone who doesn't align with your truth, and that freedom makes you magnetic to conscious people and repulsive to unconscious ones. Your sensitivity isn't a weakness. It never was. It was a sophisticated perceptual system waiting to be combined with boundaries, wisdom, and self-trust. You're not less sensitive now. You're consciously sensitive, and that consciousness transforms sensitivity from vulnerability into tactical advantage. You can feel everything and still maintain sovereignty. You can see the worst in humanity and still choose engagement on your terms. You can be powerful and peaceful simultaneously. This is the truth that Jung documented, but that most people misunderstand. Healing doesn't mean returning to who you were before the pain. You can't return. That version was unconscious. The integrated version is far more capable. You're awake. You're whole. You own every part of yourself. The compassion and the capacity for immediate severance, the gentleness and the steel, the openness and the impenetrable boundaries. You're not too much for this world. You're exactly what conscious evolution requires. Someone who can hold space for darkness without being consumed. Someone who can love deeply without losing themselves. Someone who can see through deception while maintaining their own integrity. The unhealed empath asks why this is happening to them. The integrated empath knows. It happened to forge you into something that cannot be manipulated, cannot be guilt-tripped, cannot be pulled back into unconscious patterns. You were never meant to save everyone. You were meant to save yourself, and in doing so, become proof that integration is possible. This is the transformation Jung observed. Not a return to innocence, an advancement into sovereignty. You're conscious, integrated, and operationally untouchable to anyone who mistakes your awareness for availability. You don't argue. You don't defend. You don't prove anything to anyone. You simply see through the patterns, make your assessment, and act accordingly. Usually by walking away so quietly they barely notice you're gone. No drama, no explanation, just absence. This is what a healed empath becomes. Not nicer, not more accommodating, not more open. They become sovereign, self-possessed, unshakable in their knowing, immovable in their boundaries, immune to unconscious manipulation. They become love with operational precision, compassion with strategic deployment, empathy with absolute self-respect. And that combination is one of the most formidable forces in human psychology. You understand now what took years to learn. Protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's the only sane response to a world that will consume you if you allow it. Walking away from toxicity isn't weakness. It's the ultimate expression of self-regard. Choosing yourself isn't cruelty. It's the foundation of every healthy relationship you'll ever build. When you make that choice, when you decide that your psychological integrity matters more than other people's comfort, the frequency shifts. People who drained you start avoiding you. Situations, music that depleted you stop appearing. Drama that used to follow you everywhere can no longer locate you. Not because you're hiding, because you're operating from a level where unconscious behavior cannot reach you, where manipulation deflects like water off stone, where guilt trips land in empty space because you're no longer standing in the target zone. This is your inheritance, not the ability to feel everything, the wisdom to choose what deserves to be felt, not the capacity to help everyone, the discernment to invest only in those doing their own work, not endless patience, music, the strength to walk away when patience becomes self-abandonment. Your breaking point was your initiation. Your sensitivity is your instrument. Your empathy is your advantage. And now that you wield it consciously, you're unreachable by anyone operating from unconsciousness. This is what Jung meant by individuation. This is what a healed empath actually becomes. People often imagine that a healed empath becomes happier, stronger, and finally free from pain. But Jung's insight points to something far more profound. A healed empath does not stop feeling the suffering of others. Instead, they learn the heartbreaking truth that not every soul can be saved, and not every wound belongs in their hands. For years, they carried the emotions of everyone around them, mistaking sacrifice for love and exhaustion for purpose. They stayed too long, gave too much, and broke themselves trying to keep others whole. Then one day, something changes. They stop chasing people who never choose them. They stop bleeding for relationships that only take. They stop believing their worth is measured by how much pain they can endure for someone else. And that realization hurts. Because beneath all the compassion they offered, the world was a lonely person who had spent a lifetime ignoring their own tears. The healed empath finally hears that silent cry. They finally face the child within, who only wanted to be loved without earning it. Healing is not a triumphant ending. Sometimes, It is the quiet ache of realizing that the person you needed to save all along was yourself. What makes this transformation so painful is that a healed empath begins to see their past with new eyes. The people they once called soulmates, the friendships they fought to preserve, the relationships they sacrificed themselves, for many of them were built on an invisible imbalance. They were loved for what they gave, not always for who they were. And that realization can feel like grief. Not because those memories were false, but because the empath finally understands how much of themselves they abandoned just to keep others comfortable. They remember the nights they stayed awake worrying about people who slept peacefully. They remember apologizing for needs they were never allowed to express. They remember shrinking their voice, lowering their standards, and carrying burdens that were never theirs to carry. For a while, healing feels less like freedom and more like loneliness. The healed empath starts setting boundaries, and suddenly some people disappear. They stop being endlessly available, and the phone grows quiet. They stop rescuing everyone, and some relationships begin to fade. It hurts because they once believed love meant being needed. Now they must learn that love and usefulness are not the same thing. This is where Jung's idea of individuation becomes so important. To become whole, a person must stop living through the expectations of others and begin listening to the deepest truths within themselves. For the empath, this means facing a terrifying question. Who am I when I am not taking care of everyone else? At first, there is no answer, only silence. But slowly, something beautiful begins to emerge from that silence. The empath discovers forgotten dreams, hidden passions, parts of themselves that had been buried beneath years of emotional labor. They begin to laugh without guilt, rest without explaining, say no without fear. They stop treating self-abandonment as a virtue. And perhaps the most remarkable change of all is this. They become compassionate without becoming consumed. They can sit beside someone's pain without drowning in it. They can love deeply without losing themselves. They can offer support without carrying another person's destiny on their shoulders. The healed empath still has a tender heart. They still cry, they still care. But now their kindness comes from abundance rather than sacrifice. And one day, they look back at the person. They used to be the one who begged for acceptance, chased unavailable love, and carried the world alone, and tears fill their eyes. Not because they miss that version of themselves, but because they finally understand how much that person suffered in silence. For the first time in their life, they offer that wounded soul the compassion they once gave to everyone else. And in that moment, healing becomes love coming home. Now, I'd like to share a meaningful story with everyone. Pressing hard. When the door slammed after lunch, Esther sighed. Her husband had driven the children back to school and returned to his job at the butcher shop. Their departure marked the end of yelling and fighting, reproaches and charged silences. Now she had the rest of Tuesday, her favorite day, to herself. It was a perfect day for ironing while she listened to a sure win for the Yankees. The temperature was in the 80s, and Whitey Ford was on the mound. Mel Allen just announced that Mantle was back in the starting lineup. Esther looked forward to a special treat, a glass of cold beer, at the 7th inning stretch. Ironing relaxed her. She pressed her husband's dress shirts as Whitey mowed down the Indians in the first 2 innings. Even on a hot day, she loved the billows of starch-scented steam rising from the shirts. 7 shirts for 7 days of the week, all perfectly crease-free. He could work at a bank instead of a butcher shop in these shirts. Next, she ironed her own clothes, her Sunday dress and a few skirts and blouses, and then the children's school uniforms. It was the end of the 4th, and Whitey still had his shutout, but the Yankees hadn't scored either. Would Mantle come through as he usually did for Whitey? She would iron the children's jeans and t-shirts in the bottom of the 6th, top of the 7th. She smiled to herself. They wouldn't be home for hours. Hours of peace and quiet. The rhythm of ironing soothed Esther. She felt as if she were transported to Yankee Stadium, watching Ford pitch the shutout. She wished she could save this calm. Why couldn't every day be so well planned, so pleasant? Finally, the 7th inning stretch. Esther carefully shut off the iron and propped it up. She took a cold Ballantines from the refrigerator, poured it into her Pilsner glass careful, not too much head, and took her first cooling swallow. A few more swallows, all thoroughly satisfying, and Esther turned on the iron to finish the linens in the final innings. Top of the 8th, and Ford was in trouble with 2 on and 2 out. He checked the base runner back to first, then stepped off. Back on the mound, he peered in at Berra, then shook off the sign. Another sign, and Whitey just stood there. Berra called time and walked to the mound to talk to Ford. Esther sympathized. All that effort, yet the game seemed headed for disaster. "Mom," the door on Daddy's car. It flew open. Missy fell out. Daddy took her to the hospital. I ran. The shout, the sudden spill of words. Esther felt herself squeeze the iron's Bakelite handle, the way Ford squeezed the ball before he pitched. It flashed on her to pitch the iron. Teach her son not to interrupt. Strike 3. Whitey never lost his control. She smelled burning. She had scorched a pillowcase with the hot iron. Whitey set down the side while Esther set down the iron. She looked at her son. Controlling her voice, she said, "Now tell me what happened to your sister." Dear viewers, that was our channel's discussion on the topic, why what a healed empath really becomes Jung insight. If you found this video helpful or meaningful, please consider subscribing to support the channel. If you'd like me to create more content about emotions, relationships, or other psychological topics, feel free to leave a comment and let me know. I'll do my best to help you understand why you're feeling the way you do and what's really happening beneath the surface. For now, it's time to say goodbye. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Thank you.